Hello, thank you so much for tuning in again. We're still on our site at Lake Elementaita. I'm actually standing in front of our neighbor's site on my left. But in this episode, I'm going to be addressing the issue of riparian land and what's the difference between private and public riparian. You're watching Own Land in Kenya. I am Solomon Wangwe.
That's good.
So riparian land is simply the term used to refer to a space reserved for ecological purposes. And that's the basic meaning of riparian, reserve or riparian land. In this case, we're talking about Lake Elementaita and the difference between public and private riparian. Public riparian is a standardized space from the high water marks of water bodies. It varies from region to region as well as the kind of water body. For example, it's different for a lake than it is for the beachfront at the coast. At the coast, the riparian space is much larger for obvious reason. The ocean is a bit more temperamental than a lake would be. And the same is true for rivers. If you're on a river frontage, your riparian space is going to be different. What those are specifically, you'd have to look into depending on what area your land is located. But here, it also varies on the gradient of the land. On one side of the lake, the riparian space could cover up to 200 acres because of the gradient lying low, meaning when the water levels go up, the entire area gets flooded because the water expands to that side. On higher areas, such as here and some of the areas further down the lake where Sunbird Resort is or Mwewe Camp, which are on cliffs, the public riparian there is next to zero because the water doesn't have anywhere else to go except up, and it's fighting against gravity because of the cliff. So it will depend on where exactly on the lake you are. This is one of the things that a licensed surveyor will help you determine when they survey the property for you and reference the specific policy relative to the gradient of your land next to a water body. And that's completely different from private riparian, which is a further imposition by the authorities, like is happening here at Lake Elementaita, where they want to impose a further 50-meter spacing of what they call private riparian from the high water mark based on, I think, 1964 levels of water. And this is specifically to create a buffer between the water levels and your usage of your land, hence the term private, because private means the land and the space belongs to you, it's part of your title deed and your surveyed property, but there's a specific concession you have to make based on the authority's stipulation that you cannot touch, develop in a certain way or use in a particular way because they're not going to compensate you to acquire it from you. It remains in your own ownership, but you can't do whatever you want with it. That's what private riparian means. And that's basically also to accommodate the ecological conditions needed by the lake and its wildlife and all the ecological participants for the area. And it's important to understand because it could have an adverse effect on your ability to use your property the way you thought you would. For example, if you were buying next to the lake because you thought you could build a nice pier from your front or your backyard into the water where you enjoy nice sundowners hovering over the lake, you can't do that at Lake Elementaita. It's simply not allowed because of the ecological conditions that the government wants to create for the wildlife. And so if you're not aware, you could do something that goes against the law and the policy, putting you in trouble and forcing you to incur losses when they make you bring it down. And at the very least would be very disappointing after you've purchased and made the investment. So it's important that you know, do your homework, ask the right questions, talk to licensed advocates who can do the research for you and engage the government authorities, especially when something along the UNESCO World Heritage Site adoption is happening. I hope that helps clarify a little bit. If you have any further questions, engage with us through all our social media platforms or send us an email at inquiry@goshenacquisitions.com. We're also happy to receive your calls at 0700010001, and all that information is located right below me. You're watching Own Land in Kenya. I'm Solomon Wangwe. Stay tuned for more information on strategic land investment.